What began as a calm, carefully managed daytime conversation would quietly unravel into one of the most uncomfortable moments the show had aired in years. There would be no shouting, no raised voices, no insults exchanged. Just one question, simple, precise, and one host who refused to let it slide. A question Meghan Markle was not prepared to answer. The studio lights were warm, almost forgiving. Soft gold tones reflected off the glass table, casting a glow that suggested comfort and familiarity. The mugs were arranged neatly in front of each host, positioned with the kind of symmetry meant to signal normalcy. Nothing in the room hinted that anything unusual was about to happen. The audience, accustomed to light banter and carefully guided conversations, settled into their seats with relaxed expectations. They anticipated something familiar, safe, and predictable, the kind of segment that filled time without creating ripples. Meghan Markle sat upright, hands folded lightly in front of her. Her posture was practiced, her expression calm but alert. She wore the kind of composed smile that looked effortless on camera, but required constant internal control. It was the smile of someone well versed in public scrutiny, someone who understood how every angle, every pause, every word would be interpreted. Across from her, Whoopi Goldberg leaned slightly back in her chair, her glasses resting low on her nose. She wasn't speaking much, she was listening. That alone was unusual. The segment opened smoothly. They talked about public life, about scrutiny, about the pressure of being constantly discussed by people who had never met you. Meghan spoke in complete, carefully structured sentences, each word chosen with intention. Her voice was even, measured, polished. "I think what people don't realize," Meghan said, "is how exhausting it can be to live under a microscope, where every intention is misread." Whoopi nodded slowly. "Not an agreement, just acknowledgement. That's fair," she said. "Being watched all the time will do that to anyone." The exchange felt civil, almost warm. The audience relaxed further, some nodding along. Meghan's shoulders dropped just a fraction. This was going well. This was familiar territory. She had navigated this ground many times before. But Whoopi didn't jump in with jokes. She didn't soften the moment with humor, or redirect the conversation with an anecdote. She let the silence linger, just long enough to matter. "You've spoken a lot," Whoopi continued, "about feeling misunderstood." "Yes," Meghan replied quickly, "constantly. And you've also said," Whoopi added, her tone steady, "that criticism itself has become a form of harm." Meghan hesitated. "Just a beat too long. I think when criticism ignores context," she said carefully, "it becomes something else." Whoopi leaned forward now, not aggressively, intentionally. "Here's where people get confused," she said calmly. "Because disagreement isn't the same thing as cruelty." The room shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The audience sensed it before they understood it. Meghan smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "I agree," she said, "but that line gets blurred when the criticism is relentless." "Does it?" Whoopi asked, "or does it just get uncomfortable?" Meghan's smile tightened. "I think when you're constantly questioned, it stops being productive." "Questioned," Whoopi repeated. "Or challenged." The difference was subtle, the impact was not. Meghan adjusted slightly in her chair, recrossing her hands. "When people don't have the full picture," she said, "their judgments can cause real harm." Whoopi nodded once. "True, but public narratives invite public interpretation." Meghan blinked. "That doesn't mean they deserve it." "No," Whoopi said, "but it does mean it comes with the territory." The warmth in the studio felt thinner now. The audience had gone quiet not awkwardly, but attentively. Meghan's composure held, but it required effort now. Her voice remained controlled, but the rhythm had changed. "I think," she said, "that people underestimate how damaging constant negativity can be." "Negativity," Whoopi echoed. "Or disagreement." Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There's a difference." "There is," Whoopi agreed, "but not every uncomfortable opinion is an attack." Meghan inhaled slowly. "When criticism ignores intent, it becomes unfair." "Intent matters," Whoopi said, "but outcomes matter too." The pause that followed was longer than before, long enough to register, long enough to feel deliberate. Meghan leaned forward slightly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Whoopi replied evenly, "that being misunderstood doesn't automatically mean being wronged." The audience shifted in their seats. Meghan's eyes narrowed just a touch, not in anger, but in calculation. That feels dismissive, Meghan said. Does it? Whoopi asked, or does it feel challenging? The question landed quietly, but heavily. Meghan laughed softly, without humor. I didn't come here to debate my legitimacy. I know, Whoopi said, you came here to be understood. And you don't think I am. I think, Whoopi replied carefully, that understanding doesn't require agreement. Meghan fell silent. Her gaze drifted for a brief moment, then returned to Whoopi. The composure was still there, but it was strained now, held together by discipline rather than ease. The conversation hadn't turned hostile. No one had raised their voice, but something had shifted beneath the surface. The dynamic had changed. What had once felt like affirmation had become examination. And in that shift, in the calm refusal to soften the question, in the quiet insistence on distinction, Meghan realized something she hadn't anticipated. This wasn't going to be a sympathetic exchange. It was going to be an honest one. And honesty without cushioning can feel like confrontation. The audience felt it, Meghan felt it, and Whoopi, steady, unflinching, wasn't backing down. She didn't glance toward the producers. She didn't look for reassurance, didn't seek an escape hatch. Her eyes stayed on Meghan, steady and unblinking. Or, Whoopi said quietly, it becomes inconvenient. Meghan inhaled sharply through her nose, the breath controlled but tight. I've spent years being told how I should speak, she replied, how I should feel, how grateful I should be for things that came at a cost most people never see. True, Whoopi said without hesitation. But you also gain something most people never get. Meghan's lips pressed together, the corners tightening. And that means what? She asked. That it complicates the story, Whoopi answered. And say what you want about people, but they don't like stories that ask for sympathy while standing on a stage. There it was. Meghan straightened her back, posture snapping into place. I didn't ask for sympathy, she said firmly. I asked for understanding. Whoopi tilted her head slightly. Understanding usually comes after honesty, she replied. Meghan let out a short, humorless laugh. Are you suggesting I haven't been honest? I'm suggesting, Whoopi said, that honesty doesn't mean control over the narrative. The audience shifted again. A chair creaked. Someone coughed. A ceramic mug clinked softly as a hand trembled against the glass table. The quiet wasn't comfortable anymore. It was attentive. Meghan's tone sharpened. With respect, she said, people have told my story for me since the beginning. I simply took it back. And when people questioned it, Whoopi asked, they attacked it. Meghan shot back, or they questioned you. Whoopi replied calmly. Which isn't the same thing. Meghan leaned forward now, mirroring Whoopi without realizing it. It's easy, she said, to say that when you're not the one being dissected daily. Whoopi didn't raise her voice. That was what made it unsettling. I've been dissected, she said, just not protected by silence. The sentence landed hard. Meghan's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. So now this is about privilege, she asked, her voice tighter. Because last I checked, no one here knows what it's like to be inside my experience. Whoopi nodded slowly. And last I checked, she replied, experience doesn't exempt anyone from scrutiny. A producer's voice whispered urgently into Whoopi's ear, but she didn't break eye contact. Meghan exhaled, visibly annoyed now, the mask slipping. I came here, she said, to talk, to say my truth, not to defend myself against insinuations. And yet, Whoopi said evenly, you're defending something. Meghan's hands moved now, small gestures, controlled but sharp. I won't apologize for protecting my family, she said, for setting boundaries. Boundaries are healthy, Whoopi agreed. But they don't come with immunity. The word immunity hung in the air like smoke. Meghan shook her head. This is exactly the problem, she said. People want access, and when they don't get it, they call it manipulation. Whoopi's voice remained steady. No, she said, they call it contradiction. Meghan's eyes hardened. Which contradiction? She demanded. Whoopi paused, not for drama, but for precision. You say privacy matters, she said, but your story is everywhere. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but Whoopi continued. You say you want peace, she added, but conflict follows you into every room. A low murmur rippled through the studio. This was no longer a conversation. It was an examination, careful, methodical. Meghan's composure cracked, not fully, but enough to be seen. So what is it you want from me? she asked. The silence stretched. I want consistency, Whoopi said without hesitation. And I want honesty that doesn't need applause. Meghan stared at her. Seconds passed, the camera lingered uncomfortably close. I don't think this is fair, Meghan said finally. Whoopi nodded. Fairness isn't always the goal, she replied. Clarity is. Meghan swallowed. You're putting me in an impossible position. No, Whoopi said. I'm asking you to stand in the one you already occupy. The audience didn't move. No applause cue came. No music swelled to signal relief. The segment had gone somewhere it wasn't supposed to go, and everyone knew it. Meghan leaned back slowly, her expression carefully rebuilt, but something essential had shifted. I think people project onto me, she said. They turn me into a symbol instead of a person. That happens, Whoopi acknowledged, but symbols don't argue this hard against being questioned. Meghan's voice lowered. So what? You think I enjoy this? I think, Whoopi replied, you're very good at surviving it. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Survival isn't a performance, no, Whoopi said softly, but sometimes it becomes one. Another silence, heavier now. The producer gestured frantically from off camera. Time was up. The segment was supposed to move on. Meghan adjusted her jacket, smoothing it unnecessarily. I won't apologize for my life, she said. I'm not asking you to, Whoopi replied. I'm asking you to stop confusing challenge with cruelty. Meghan stood very still. The practiced warmth she had arrived with was gone, replaced by something colder, more guarded. The lights were still warm, the set was still beautiful, but comfort had left the room, and when the cameras finally cut away, everyone understood the same thing. No one had shouted, no one had lost control, but the truth, unapplauded, uninterrupted, and unsoftened, had spoken anyway. A ripple moved through the audience, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Nothing explosive had been said, no line had been crossed, and yet something in the room had shifted. The tone had changed, not by force, but by precision. Meghan adjusted her hands in her lap, her fingers interlacing more tightly than before. The movement was small, almost invisible, but it betrayed the effort it took to maintain composure. I don't think discomfort should be the price of telling your truth, she replied, her voice steady, measured, carefully neutral. Whoopi didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to soften the moment. She allowed the words to settle, then answered calmly. No, she said, but sometimes discomfort is the result of hearing a truth you don't like. Meghan's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. I think that depends on who's speaking, and who's being listened to, Whoopi asked. She nodded once, as if answering her own question. That's exactly what I want to talk about. The camera cut to a wider angle. The glass table, the neatly arranged mugs, the warm, composed set, all of it suddenly felt too quiet, too still, as though the space itself were holding its breath. Meghan glanced briefly toward the audience, then back to Whoopi. Her voice remained polite, but the edge had arrived now, unmistakable beneath the smooth delivery. I'm very aware, she said, that certain people feel entitled to judge experiences they've never lived. Whoopi didn't flinch. She met the statement head on, her tone even unraised, and I'm very aware, she replied, that sometimes power wears the costume of pain. The silence that followed wasn't scripted, it wasn't planned. It simply happened. Meghan blinked. I'm not sure what you're implying. Whoopi met her gaze directly. I'm asking, she said, whether accountability feels like an attack when you're not used to being questioned. A murmur moved through the studio. Not loud enough to interrupt, but enough to register. The audience sensed they had crossed into unfamiliar territory. Meghan's smile disappeared completely now. I've answered questions for years, she said. I don't avoid them. Whoopi raised an eyebrow, not challengingly, but curiously. Then let's keep going. The producer signaled to move forward. The segment wasn't over yet, but something had already cracked. Meghan knew it. Everyone did. The applause cue never came. It wasn't planned that way, but no one in the studio felt comfortable clapping. The air had thickened, heavy with words that hadn't been said yet, but were already understood. Meghan shifted in her chair, crossing one leg over the other with more force than necessary. She leaned forward slightly now, signaling engagement, but also defiance. I think what's happening here, she said, her voice still smooth, still controlled, is that people expect a certain kind of response from me, and when I don't deliver that, when I don't perform pain the way they want, it becomes suspicious. Whoopi didn't look away. Or, she said gently, it becomes incomplete. Meghan frowned. Incomplete, yes, Whoopi replied, because pain that only points outward never has to examine itself. Meghan's breath caught for a fraction of a second before she recovered. That's an unfair expectation. Is it? Whoopi asked. Or is it just an unfamiliar one? Meghan shook her head. You're framing this like I owe people something. No, Whoopi said. I'm saying when you speak publicly, you invite engagement, even the kind that doesn't affirm you. That engagement, Meghan replied, has consequences. So does influence, Whoopi said. The audience remained silent. Even the smallest reactions, laughter, murmurs, applause, had vanished. Everyone was listening now, not for drama, but for resolution. Meghan's voice lowered slightly. I didn't come here to be interrogated. I know. Whoopi said, you came here to be heard, and am I? Yes, Whoopi replied, but being heard doesn't mean being protected. Meghan leaned back, her posture still composed but visibly strained. It feels like you're dismissing the emotional cost. I'm acknowledging it, Whoopi said. I'm just not letting it end the conversation. Meghan hesitated. That pause, short but heavy, did more than any argument could have. It revealed uncertainty. When people question my intentions, Meghan said carefully, it feels personal. That's understandable, Whoopi replied, but personal doesn't automatically mean unjust. Meghan exhaled slowly. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Whoopi said, that discomfort doesn't always mean harm, and that criticism isn't always cruelty. The camera lingered on Meghan's face. She nodded once, slowly, but the agreement didn't quite land. Her eyes were sharper now, her composure more rigid. I think, she said, there's a difference between discussion and dissection. There is, Whoopi agreed, and the difference is intent. And whose intent matters? Meghan asked. Everyone's, Whoopi replied, not just the person speaking. The silence returned again, not empty, but charged. The audience could feel it. This wasn't going back to light conversation. The moment had passed. Meghan sat very still now. The practiced ease she had arrived with was gone, replaced by something more guarded. I think, she said finally, that people are uncomfortable when they can't place me neatly into a narrative. That may be true, Whoopi said, but refusing the narrative doesn't exempt you from responsibility. Meghan looked down briefly, then back up. Responsibility for what? For how your words land, Whoopi said, not just how they're intended. The producer glanced nervously toward the stage manager. Time was running, but no one interrupted. Meghan's voice remained calm, but it carried weight now. I won't apologize for telling my story. I'm not asking you to, Whoopi replied. I'm asking you to hear how it sounds when it's challenged. The audience sat motionless. No applause, no reaction, just attention. The segment hadn't ended, but the tone had irrevocably changed. What began as a familiar conversation had become something else entirely. A moment of exposure, not through confrontation, but through refusal. Whoopi hadn't raised her voice. Meghan hadn't lost control. And yet, everyone in the room understood the same thing. This wasn't comfort television anymore. I don't need to live your reality, Whoopi said quietly, almost conversationally, but with the weight of every word measured carefully, to see when someone is fighting the mirror instead of the world. That was the moment. The subtle pivot, the quiet shift in energy that no one in the audience could name, yet everyone felt. Meghan Markle leaned back in her chair, arms crossing over her chest fully, sealing herself off. The warmth, the familiar calm she had carried onto the set, had evaporated. It wasn't dramatic, not in the obvious sense of yelling or gesturing wildly, but the atmosphere had changed fundamentally. Something in the air had thickened. Something unspoken had arrived. The segment was still live. The break was minutes away. Yet for Meghan, the clock might as well have been an hour. She was already weighing whether she'd sit through the remaining minutes. The brake light stayed off. No commercial relief, no chance to reset, just cameras, just silence. Just two women who had stopped pretending this was an interview, and instead were inhabiting a space that was more interrogation than conversation. Meghan remained leaned back, arms crossed, eyes fixed forward, not on Whoopi, not on the audience, but somewhere beyond, as though she were visualizing the exit that had yet to come. Her face held the calm of control, but the rigidity of it betrayed the effort it demanded. It was a posture of endurance as much as of self-protection. Whoopi noticed, "You okay?" Her voice carried the slightest inflection of concern, gentle but direct. It was careful, calculated to probe without aggression. Meghan turned her head slowly, letting her gaze settle on Whoopi for a fraction of a second before redirecting it elsewhere. "I'm fine," she said, words calm, measured. "I'm just trying to understand why this feels less like a conversation and more like an interrogation." Whoopi didn't smile. There was no charm in her reply, only clarity, because questions get uncomfortable when they stop being predictable. She said. Meghan's eyes flashed, the briefest spark of exasperation breaking through her calm veneer. "So that's what this is?" she asked quietly, but with an edge. "Unpredictability for ratings." A few people in the front row of the audience inhaled sharply. The tension in the room, subtle but dense, had reached a perceptible point. Some leaned forward instinctively, while others shifted in their seats, uncertain whether to react or remain still. Whoopi leaned forward, elbows lightly resting on the glass table between them. "No," she said firmly, measured, deliberate. This is what happens when someone who's been listened to for years finally hears something they don't control. Meghan let out a breath that bordered on a scoff, soft but audible, as though she were attempting to expel the idea that her world had been shaken in this quiet, deliberate way. "You're framing me as someone who can't handle dissent," she said. Her words were calm, precise, but carried the pressure of restraint. "That's not fair, and it's certainly not accurate." "Then handle it," Whoopi said. There was no sarcasm, no cruelty in the tone, only the clean edge of a challenge, calm, direct, unavoidable, a statement that left no space for evasion. Meghan sat upright again, straightening her posture as though physically reclaiming space and authority. "I have handled it," she said, relentlessly, gracefully, despite being pulled in multiple directions at once, verbally attacked on every angle without raising her voice, without panicking. Whoopi raised a single eyebrow. "And yet," she said, even, neutral, precise, "every disagreement becomes an attack in your version of events." Meghan's fingers curled slightly against her forearm. The movement was subtle but significant, a micro-expression of tension. Ting, the moment where restraint becomes effort, where calm requires constant work against the impulse to react. "You don't know what it's like," Meghan said, her voice lowering almost imperceptibly, "to be misrepresented constantly, to be reduced." Whoopi nodded once, deliberate, acknowledging but unflinching. "I do," she said. "I just didn't build a brand around it." The words landed like a dropped glass on marble, clear, resonant, unavoidable. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer's mouth cut silently, but the director shook his head. No interruption, no interjection. Everyone knew this was a moment that couldn't be smoothed over by the usual pacing or filler dialogue. Meghan stared at Whoopi, the word hanging in the air between them. "A brand," she repeated, incredulous. "You think this is a brand?" "I think," Whoopi said evenly, "that pain becomes currency when it's packaged." Meghan's composure fractured, not dramatically, not violently, but unmistakably. The small fissures of tension crept across her face, subtle yet visible. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed tight. "That's a cruel thing to say," she replied, her voice measured, but carrying the weight of indignation, especially coming from another woman. Whoopi didn't flinch. Not a muscle in her face shifted. Not a pause betrayed discomfort. "Cruelty isn't asking hard questions," she said softly, deliberately. "Cruelty is letting power go unchecked because no one dares to ask." The room, previously warm and almost comforting, had shifted completely. The studio lights no longer softened the tension. They highlighted it, casting stark reflections off the glass table. The audience felt it. They leaned in subtly, sensing the gravity of words exchanged without shouting, drama, or overt conflict. The tension existed entirely in the quiet, in the weight of what was left unsaid, and the implications embedded in every statement. Meghan's hands tightened into fists briefly in her lap, then relaxed again, controlled but tense. Her jaw set. The air around her seemed thicker. Whoopi's calm, deliberate observation had carved open a space where truth, challenge, and discomfort coexisted without resolution. There was no applause, no laughter, no distracting anecdote to soften the impact. Every eye in the room followed the exchange. You see, Whoopi continued, her voice soft but unyielding, when power is unchallenged, it becomes absolute. And when it's absolute, it is invisible, untouchable. Accountability disappears under the weight of performance, and honesty becomes selective. Meghan inhaled slowly, her chest rising deliberately. The tight smile returned briefly, not for warmth, but as armor. I didn't ask to have my pain scrutinized like this, she said. I came here to explain it, to tell my story on my terms. And that's fair, Whoopi said calmly. But telling a story publicly always opens it to examination. Not to destroy you, not to belittle you, but to understand it. And sometimes understanding is uncomfortable. Meghan's head tilted back, her eyes narrowing, scanning beyond the audience, beyond Whoopi, as if calculating the distance between explanation and exposure. So the lesson is, I must accept that discomfort will follow me, she asked. Her voice was measured, sharp at the edges, careful not to break completely. Yes, Whoopi replied, discomfort is inevitable, control is an illusion, and power, true power, lies not in the narrative you create, but in how you respond when it slips from your hands. The cameras rolled on silently. The segment was still live, no commercial break, no relief, just two women, one conversation, an audience suspended between the visible and the implied. Meghan sat back, arms crossed, eyes fixed forward, not on Whoopi, not on the audience, but somewhere beyond them, as if mapping the path to the moment the segment would finally end. And in that silence, in that measured tension, every word, pause, and glance became part of the story being told. Not just for the audience, but between the two of them. The warmth was gone. The conversation had transformed into a quiet, relentless accountability, delivered without theatrics, without raised voices, but with precision, sharp enough to leave everyone in the room feeling it.